Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Drunken Master. So, this for me has got to be the best Jackie Chan movie that I've ever seen. And I, of course, have seen Rumble in the Bronx, and I've seen some Rush Hour films. But still, I feel that Drunken Master is a great Jackie Chan film. It has both kung fu and comedy. It's freaking awesome. Especially when we just start to see that aunt that just starts to go on and is to clean Jackie Chan, aka Freddy's clock. I'm like, yeah, this is pretty sweet. So, to me, a lot of people can go on and state that this movie is probably very long-winded. It's almost a 2-hour film. And once they start, like, thumbing through that book of all the drunken gods, I was like, okay, this is kind of stretching. But, and plus also there's a lot of training in this film. There's a lot of times where we kind of see Jackie Chan do these kind of wrist exercises, which of course is to get into grip strength, and is, if you were to ever go on and see like mountain climbers would try to focus on getting very good grip strength, as long as kind of working on the rest of their body, because with mountain climbing, you need to kind of work on everything. So we go on into this film, and we are to realize during this movie that I was to look up the whole cast in IMDb, and I would find out that, like, okay, here's the name of this person, here's the name of that person. And then I turn around and start watching this movie, and they had gone on to Americanize most of the cast here, and so I was like, what the fuck? Like, so we had Jackie Chan's name, who is actually like Wong Fei Hung in the movie, and in the American version of this film, his name is Freddie Wong, and his dad is named like Robert Wong, and I'm like, okay, whatever that is. It kind of reminds me of the Mad Max movie, the original Mel Gibson one, where we had the movie at first go out, and it was like dubbed over with all the actors, where they then turn around and years later just re-released it with everybody going on and just kind of talking that film normally, and people could clearly understand what the actors were stating anyways. So I was like, okay, why was this ever to have been dubbed over? It just seems kind of weird. It feels like the time when Arnold Schwarzenegger was Hercules, and he had to be, like, dubbed over, and that was weird. Don't get it, but it is what it is. So, we have Jackie Chan, who is Freddy in this film, who it seems to be a wild animal. This character is to go on and beat up a bunch of people, and is to try and have a woman kiss him, and him, like, hug on to this woman. And so his aunt is to go on and treat him that you should not be going on and doing that with women, and get your kind of filthy hands off of my my kid, my girl. And so then we go on to have Freddy realize that there are consequences to the stuff that he was to go on and do. To the point to where his father is to disown him, because that's always what happens seemingly in a kung fu karate film. There's always a disowning part of something. I don't know why, it always is what that is. So we have Freddy that is to almost to run away, or otherwise be forced to train with a guy named So High. So if you really go on and look at So High, and you look at Mr. Miyagi from Karate Kid, looks almost the same. We basically get the same looking guy. If only we would have got the same actor. But anyways, so we have So High, and like, for me, there were certain times where I was like watching this movie, and I was thinking in the back of my head, like, I want to go on and just kind of play like the Power Rangers theme in this movie somewhere, because it like a lot of the fighting was just like dun, 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 dun. It was kind of like the Mighty Morphin style, where we would go on and like see the crane and we would see all these like movements, and I was like, and all of this is to be like very like animal like movements, and so I was like, oh, like Power Rangers kind of took this kind of same approach, and because of course there's only so many kind of kung fu styles, and there are always so many uh, styles to kind of pick and choose from. But so we go on to have Freddy, who ends up being stuck, being tortured by Sohai, where he's doing all these kind of wrist exercises to eventually get his grip strength up so he can be a much stronger man, especially after he has to go on and kind of be hung upside down and be kind of pouring these things of water, these little cups into this bucket that's behind him, and like there's so much just like pouring of water into random massive jars. There's just a lot of those exercises going on in this film. But so, and also like to me, this technically does remind me of the JCVD film, the Jean-Claude film, Kickboxer. And especially my favorite part of that whole movie is when we go on and we have Jean-Claude, who is kind of like kicking this tree, and he can't break the tree. And so the teacher is like, why are you here? Like, you know what? Like, if you can't break this tree, like, leave. Like, I'm done with you. And we have the teacher that's like, well, hey, like, what happened to your brother was not his fault, it was your fault. And then he's like, oh, really? And then Jean-Claude just starts like, pa, pa, pa in the tree. It knocks over, and then he falls to the ground, and he's like, ha! And so, like, the woman is, like, looking over the guy's, like, leg, is like, man, like, he effed up his leg. But it's like, but yeah, but you got him to do what he needed to do. You took that anger, and you shifted it into a motivator. And that's the thing that I went on and I always liked about certain like fighting movies, when it would just go on and be all about like, well, hey, this is personal, this is a vendetta, this is to be revenge, and you would get that person to like do whatever he needs or she needs to do to get to that point. Even if they lose, still they want to go on and get that last attack in, that last thing to just be like, well, yeah, like I may go out here, but I'm taking you with me. And that is to be a really interesting, just like, no, like I'm going to get to you any way that I can. And that's what makes a really good kind of fight or whichever in my brain, in my noggin, to just be like, this person is willing to risk it all to get what it needs or get what they need to get the job done. So, with that said, we go on to have Freddy, who is to be this wild animal, because of course he is not yet, I guess, to mature. So he is kind of goofily playing around with his coaches and his professors and whichever, his even his dad, probably, I'm sure, joking around with him. So we come to find that Freddy is to go too far. Not really realizing what the consequences are for the things that he is to go on and do. So Freddy is to then try and get a girl to kiss him and hug him, and that woman's aunt is to start attacking and decking Freddy for him realizing that he can't just like get what he wants from a woman. And so Freddy is to start combating this aunt, and she wipes the floor with him. It's freaking awesome. And so Freddy, even after that, is to start fights with other guys, and doesn't realize the eventual consequence that all of that will eventually have until we finally get Freddy to be with his dad, Robert. I don't know why his name is Robert, but it is. So we have Robert that goes on to disown his son, and is to want to shove him off to a trainer named So High. And then Freddy is to be like, well, crap, like, I'm gonna have to go on, and I'm gonna be tortured to death by So High, and that's where it kind of has me kind of leave it there till we get to spoilers. There's a lot more going on than what I just stated. Like, there's a whole beginning part that I didn't mention, and there's this kind of interesting assassination story that's really kind of interesting. But so, with that said, I'm going to go on into the double five time territory, because it's about that time. The grading of this film is, this movie was freaking epic. I loved it. It was great. It may not be for everybody, but I don't care. I liked it anyways. It was available on Tubi. You can probably go on, and if you don't have Tubi available, you can probably find apps like Vidlesy, Videsy. From when I saw it on recently, I think it bizarrely also changed its name to like Vodlesy, Vods, Vodesy. I don't know why it changed it, but more likely, if you probably go on and you probably look through and find Vidlesy, you can probably find it. So, with that said, it is what it is. So, let's go on into that double fab. It's about that time yet again to, of course, go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. This movie, there's like, the fights are very choreographed. Well, I can admit that, but they're still really good fights. They still are. So, with that said, in the beginning of this film, we have a man named Thunderleg that is to make his way to this secret mailbox that is to have him get hit this piece of paper and find out that a guy named Charlie Way is to get killed next for $500. This is to be a death warrant that is to be given to this assassin. So, we go on to have Charlie Way that is going through a number of these kind of set up like kind of things of logs where we have Charlie who's consistently like breaking all these logs, I think with his hand or just whichever. He's just kind of breaking them. And so we have these kind of wood pieces that are just kind of like breaking, chopping, whatever. So we have Thunderleg that is making his way to Charlie Way. So we find out that Charlie Way, it's like, well, hey, you're Charlie Way, right? And we go on and like, and Charlie Way's like, yeah, I'm that guy. Who are you if you have a name? And he's like, well, I'm Thunderleg. And it's like, oh my god, like, you have a devil's kick. And so Thunderleg is like, well, yeah, like, and I heard that you're the four-door fist champion. So we go on and are to state that Thunderleg was to have taken this contract to kill Charlie Way. And Charlie Way is just like, well, hey, like, whatever that person is to pay you, I'll double it. And, like, I'll have you go out and kill that person. And Thunderleg is like, I'm sorry, but that doesn't work that way. Like, I've already taken this contract, I've already agreed to it, so I'm gonna have to take you out. So they go on and they fight one another, and we of course have Thunderleg succeed. So we then go on to have Freddie Wong, who is Jackie Chan's character, in this class with a huge number of people all trying to learn Kung Fu. So we have Freddie in this martial arts class, and we immediately see him kind of goofing around and doing all these things. Come to find out, we have Freddy that tries to do a ton of shortcuts with all of this martial arts training. It's hilarious. But so we have Robert, who is to be called Master, is to call over the professor and is telling him, like, well, hey, like, I want you to go on and I want you to take over this class because, like, I need to go elsewhere. So we have the professor that takes over the class, and he goes on and is to tell everybody, like, okay, everyone, we're going on and we're going to do the 5 animal styles. So he goes on to demonstrate, like, a number of these styles. And we have one point have the professor who is, like, disciplining one of the kids, one of the guys, because, of course, he has his hands in a very non-correct way. Just kind of slaps him. So we go on to have the whole entire time that the professor is, of course, kind of like looking at this guy. We have Freddy the whole time who is mocking him, like, gotta smack him on the back of the head. And the professor's like, who just did that? Like, what the heck? So the professor just keeps going along, and so we all of a sudden have the professor going on and correcting someone else on their horse stance. So we then have the professor who again gets slapped by Freddy, and we go on and finally just have the professor who just assumes that it's this guy who he keeps disciplining. So Professor just lets this guy have it, just slaps the crap out of him, and he's like, well, hey, man, I didn't do that to you. It's like, well, who did? And so he points at Freddy. This is the guy that has these kind of like freckles on his face that obviously looks, in all honesty, kind of painted on, but that's just me. So we then go on to have now the professor who's just wanting to discipline Freddy. And so we have Freddy that is to go on and say, well, hey, like, your kung fu is a good start, but it isn't the greatest. Like, really, like your way of doing things is just poor. And so we all of a sudden have, like, the professor is going into, like, horses stances, and we have, like, Freddy who, like, drops him to the ground and kind of trips him. And we have him, like, being kind of thrown. And so all of a sudden we start to have just both the professor and Freddy, as everybody's kind of, like, scatter and just kind of get away from these two. We just start having them fight one another. And so the whole entire time we have Freddy who is using the professor's hat to, like, fight with him, to, like, shove his hat in the guy's face, or is to kind of take his hat and kind of toss it on his head. But there's, like, technically some prop fighting going on here, and I thought that this was pretty funny. So we have the group of everybody who is watching this fight go on. They're laughing about it. So we have Freddy that ultimately shows this professor a lesson that he's not as good as he thinks he is. So we go on and leave after this class is over, where the guys are just kind of praising Freddy. It's like, man, you showed that professor who's who. And so we go on and we have a guy that seemingly has no name, who is the kind of the seemingly freckled kid, the freckled guy. And he is to be Chu Jun Lee, I believe is his actual name. But there isn't an actual, like, name of this character. So he is to go on and look at some girl and be like, ooh ah, ooh ee. So we all of a sudden have Freddy who's assuming that this guy is to be doing this kind of call because he is really enjoying his dumpling. So it's like, hey man, give me that dumpling. And the guy is like, oh no, I didn't say the ooh ah ooh ee over my food, I was to say that about this woman. And they're like, oh yeah, like I guess she is rather attractive. So we come to find out that this girl, I believe her name is Hung. And so we have Freddy, who is kind of like making bets with the guys. And so we have Freddy that's like, well, hey, like, should I go on and get this girl to kiss me? It's like, no, I think I can do even better. I can get her to hug me too. And so they're like, okay, yeah, let's place bets. Let's see if he can do it. So Freddy goes over there, and he then is a kind of talk to this girl. It's like, well, hey, like I think I have something in my eye. Do you think that you can kind of blow into it? Like I would really appreciate it if you could just kind of blow into it. And so she blows into the guy's eye without even knowing who he is. And so the second time that she does this, he goes on and kind of like pushes his head to where she kisses him instead. And then all of a sudden, Freddy is to then tell Hung that her legs is to have a snake around it. And so all of a sudden, this girl is to jump up in the air, and Freddy is to catch her. And we then realize that this girl is to have hugged Freddy. And so both of the guys are like, man, like, I should get that to work on your sister. And the guy's like, what did you just say? It's like, so we all of a sudden have this woman's mother who comes to eventually be Freddy's aunt that he doesn't realize is his own aunt. So we all of a sudden have Hung's aunt, or whoever this is to come in, and I'm just going to call her aunt. So she just starts decking freaking Freddy. And then he's like, oh, like, so it seems that you know Kung Fu. Like, well, so do I. And so they start fighting one another, and we just clearly have it to where this woman is to have like these really like straight, just like, man, her legs. Like those legs though. So with those kicks, it was pretty awesome. But so this on is going on and wrecking Freddy. It's awesome. And so she's beating him so bad that he's going on and stating, it's like, well, I'm going to run away, and like, let's just say that you won. And so Freddy runs off because he can't take it anymore. He's getting clocked. So we go on to have two men that are making their way through this market. So we have a guy named Jerry and his possible like security or guardian, or possibly just friend. I'm not quite sure. Maybe his maybe it's just his like kind of bodyguard. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. Let's go with bodyguard. So we have Jerry who's kind of walking along, and we all of a sudden have this guy who's picking up this kind of thing of peas, and we have him like smack right into Jerry. So this bodyguard goes on and is to kind of like smack up this guy with the peas and like push him against this wall. And so we then all of a sudden have the guy who's kind of looking back, and he's like, oh, Jerry, oh yeah, I should get back to you. And he like kicks him and slaps him around. It's like, man, everybody just gets decked by everybody. It's freaking awesome. Man, like to see this movie and see how many times people just up and just somebody, I'm like, dang, man. So everybody's whipping everybody. So we all of a sudden have this Jade antique salesman who is to go on and give this piece to Jerry to be like, hey, look at this piece. Isn't it great? And so we have Jerry that's like, well, hey, how expensive is this? We also have Jerry that bizarrely has this like bird cage with him. I don't know why, but it's a thing that he has. So we have this Jade antiquer that is to state that this is $10. And we have Jerry that's like, this is way too expensive. I'm like, $10? But also, when thinking about it, to assassinate somebody, it's like $500 or $1,000. I'm like, wow, like that was to kill somebody during this time period. Wow, the escalation of money for it all. So we have, of course, Jerry that states like, dude, like $10 is way too expensive. So we go on and we have Jerry that walks away, and his bodyguard gives the guy 10 cents. And he's like, 10 cents? No, like, I cannot take 10 cents. So we have the seller that runs back to Jerry, and it's like, no. Like, I'm not going to get paid, like, 10 cents for this jade. Doesn't work that way. I want my jade back. And so the guy goes on and gives him the money, and so we have Jerry that breaks the jade on the ground, and so now we have the seller that's like, well, hey, I want my jade back, or I want my my money that I asked for, my $10, because you broke the jade. So we have Freddy that steps in to help this salesman because this guy's gonna get decked. So Freddy comes in there and just kind of pushes the salesman aside. He's just like, you know what, like, I'm going to go on and kind of fight for this guy. So, like, you better give him his money. So we then have Freddy versus Jerry, and we go on into this fight, and the best part I think about it is the, like, when we actually get to where Jerry, like, gets this sword, and then Freddy gets the sword away from Jerry, and is to every single time use the blunt part of the blade to where it won't cut into Jerry. And then we have a point where Jerry is to be on this table, and we have like Freddy like pretending to like chop him up like carrots. And so we again consistently have Freddy tell Jerry, it's like, well, hey, I'm not really cutting you, because of course it's all by accident that I'm not really cutting you, but it's all the fact of this guy's just playing with him. So we also had like Freddy dumping Jerry into these like straw-looking trash can-like things, but I'm assuming that's not what they really are. Most of those things were probably used to like carry all the stuff that all the people had for that day, but it just looks like a trash can to me. So we go on and have like also the fight with the banana, where like Freddy somehow gets bananas, and so we have Jerry who just starts chopping up the banana, and it gets seemingly so close to where it's like, oh my god, I almost chopped my hands off. But that was really funny too. So, and Freddy also gives money to the salesman to just say, hey, get out of here, like run off with this money. So we go on and have Freddy, who is to have gone on and beaten Jerry in a number of different ways. So we then have Robert, who is to go on and meet with this aunt, as well as the woman that this aunt is to be with. So we have the aunt that is to go on and say to Robert, it's like, well, hey, like, where is Freddy? Like, I heard so many good things about him. And we end up having Freddy, who just is kind of like sneaking in, and then he realizes that the one family member that he's supposed to meet, he's like, oh crap, I met her before, and she beat the crap out of me. So we go on to have Freddy, who comes in the room, and he like comes into the room like as if his neck is broken. And so when Freddy walks in the room, Robert's like, hey, what's up? What's up, Freddy? What's going on? And Freddy's like, yeah, like I pulled a neck muscle, like I just can't look at you right now. And so the aunt is like, well, hey, I can fix that. And so she like fixes his neck, and so she realizes like, oh, I remember you. Because of course, I believe the last time that the aunt had gone on to see Freddy, who was so young, and so now when she sees him now, it's like, oh, like you're that same guy. So we then go on to have the aunt, um, to say it's uh, yeah, like I have heard that Freddy is to be really good in kung fu, and I really want to go on and see him kind of fight one day. And Robert's like, "Oh, you want to see him in a match?" And the aunt's like, "Yes, of course I would. I would love to see that." And so we have the aunt that is to also state that like everyone's speaking very highly of Freddy as she was to make her way into the town. So but then she turns around and then she ends up like bad mouthing him also. And so uh the aunt then says that uh her and the woman that she was with had gotten attacked while they were making their way through this town, and uh and that luckily like the aunt was able to kind of save herself from this attacker. And so we have Robert that goes on and states like, well, hey, whoever this guy is, like I'm gonna go on and fillet him for what he was to go on and do, and I'm gonna flay the skin off of his back. So we end up having the two girls who were stating that it's like, well, yeah, guess who it was? It was actually Freddy. And we have Robert who just decks his own son. And so we then have Robert that goes on to like slap him so hard that we have Freddy that does this like flip. So we all of a sudden have Mr. Lee coming in, this very rich guy of this town, and we all of a sudden have this guy who's coming in on this stretcher, and he like is to be like head to toe like mummified basically because of all of his broken bones. So we have Mr. Lee that is talking to Robert Wong, and we have this body cast that's all over this guy, and come to find out it was Jerry. So we had Mr. Lee that states that his son Jerry was to be beaten by Freddy because Freddy was a wild animal and was attacking his son. And so Robert goes on and is to look at Freddy. It's like, I'm going to beat you to death. Like, I'm just going to get to you. And so really no time for Freddy at all to state it's like, well, hey, there's a whole story, like you don't know what really happened here. And so the aunt is to talk to Mr. Lee and just state it's like, well, hey, like how about you go on and you have somebody like be like your champion, and they get 10 strokes. They get 10 hits. And so we have, of course, Robert that is going on and also disowning his son Freddy. But so we have Jerry's bodyguard that decides like, well, hey, I will deliver these strikes. Because we go on to have Freddy, who is to kind of take this stick, and he tosses it onto like Jerry, and it's like, well, hey, yeah, you go ahead and you try to hit me if you can. And so the bodyguard's like, no, I will go on and I will deliver this. So we go on to it at first where we have Freddy who's kind of fighting this guy, and even almost the aunt is getting involved. But so we have at one point where like the 10 strikes are over, but the bodyguard is like, no, I want to keep going. Like, I want to just beat this guy. So we get to a point where Freddy is even like lifting up the stretcher that Jerry was on, and kind of like pushing it to where it tries to fall on the bodyguard, but Jerry instead just kind of plah onto the ground. So we go on and have, uh, of course, at the end of all this, we do have Freddy that goes on to like take down this bodyguard, and so after that, Freddy is to still need to get disciplined. And so the aunt is to try to convince Robert, it's like, well, hey, like, how about instead of disowning him, you just figure out a way to, like, really, uh, like, break him with practice. Like, break him with some kind of, like, torture to where he'll finally go on and, like, realize his mistake. I guess that's, like, timeout, or that's, like, any other thing that a kid would usually get like taught as a kid. So we go on to have Robert that's like, well, okay then, 5 hours in the horse stance. And so we go on to have Freddy, who is in this stance, and he cannot go on. He's in this kind of like squatting position. And so he's holding these cups on his shoulder, and he has cups on his thighs. And we end up finding out that he's going to get a cup on his head. We have the professor that's going on and kind of pouring all this hot water on to Freddy, and is pouring into these cups. So we consistently have Freddy who is to have to just squat here, because if he doesn't, he's going to get poked by this kind of spike that is kind of implanted onto this pot. So we go on and have 5 hours of this. So we have, of course, one of Freddy's friends that comes in, and he is to apply this kind of chair that looks kind of much more like a bench. It's like a wooden piece and kind of like two kind of V's, so it's kind of like this, like almost, kind of like construction like chair. But anyways, so normally you would go on and like jump over it and like track and field, whatever those goofy things are called. So we have Freddy that goes on to like sit on this chair, and then his father ends up coming by, and he notices the chair. He notices the wood piece sticking out. And so we have Robert that is coming to Freddy. It's like, well, hey, like how are things? Like, how are you? And so Freddy's like, yeah, I'm tired. And Robert's like, well, that's weird because you don't look tired. And so Robert looks at the professor. It's like, well, hey, like, so like, have you been really like just watching him and seeing that he's to go on and really go on and give this his all? And the professor's like, yeah, I've been watching him like a hawk. It's like, oh, really? Because I guess you never realized that this guy is sitting on a chair. And then the professor's like, like he is. And so, like, man, like, this guy will never learn. So we go on to have him in a different apparatus, a whole different training thing, a whole different torture device. So we have also Robert that is realized it's like, well, dude, we need to go on and send him on to Sohai so he can get tortured. So we now have Freddy, who is to be put into this this kind of weird, like kind of stretched out machine where he has this rope that has this bucket in it, and it's being hung over his neck, and he's kind of hunched over, and he's to be balancing on these two kind of wooden pieces, and he's to kind of be hung here, having to go on and like balance all of this stuff, or balance him kind of being on these wood pieces and him having this thing over his neck. So we have his friend come along, the the guy that we had seen earlier trying to help him with this chair to have this not be so torturous. So the guy comes in and is to try to loosen this contraption that Freddy is in. And so Freddy falls over and is break this jar. And so he's like, man, like this was choking me. This is awful. And so we now have Freddy's friend that's going on and telling him, it's like, well, hey, man, like this isn't going to be anything like so high. And we, of course, have Freddy that's like, well, what are you talking about? So we have at some point where where Freddy's uncle Sohai was to cripple one of his other students for life, and was to have like had him lose his hair, his teeth, busted his nose. So we have Freddy that's like, oh my god, like this guy had just torn this guy to shreds. So they're like, well, what are we gonna freaking do now? And so Freddy comes up with the only plan that he can possibly do, and that's to run away. So he gets the heck out of there. So he goes to the Yu-He restaurant, or the Yu-He, I'm not quite sure how that's pronounced. So he goes to this restaurant, and we all of a sudden have us realize that Freddy doesn't have any money. So Freddy just goes on to find one guy sitting alone, and so we all of a sudden have Freddy that just starts to order a lot of food and a lot of wine, and so he's sitting next to this guy, and so Freddy all of a sudden is to eat all this food, and it seems like he's sharing with this guy. It's like, hey, take this food. Hey, yeah, hey, drink more wine. Hey, yeah. And so we all of a sudden have Freddy who has eaten so much that he has to go on and adjust his waist tie that is on his pants. And so we go on and have Freddy that states, like, well, hey, man, I'm going to go and I'm going to pay for my bill. Hey, if we meet again later, you can go on and I'll pay for your meal, and so on and so forth. So Freddy walks out, and all of a sudden one guy is to kind of hold him there, and he states it's like, okay, like $1.05. And so Freddy's to go on and say it's like, oh, well, like, that guy's going to pay for my bill because I came with him. And so we have Freddy also state that he's that guy's son. And so we have the guy who is to kind of hold him up, be like, well, no, you're not, because that's the owner of the restaurant, and I am his son, so you must be a bastard. So we then realize that Freddy is not going to pay for this bill. So we then have a character called Gorilla coming in, and we have all these waiters that are trying to fight off Freddy's character. So we have Gorilla that comes in, and he has over his bandana, thieves will be punished. So Gorilla comes in, and he has this like weird chest hair kind of like cutting. It's good on them for trying something interesting here. But so we have Gorilla that comes in, and he's like, like very big and just very like menacing. So we go on to have the waiters that are doing this like really interesting like table fight where like Jackie Chan is having his hands and his legs kind of on these two tables, and he's kind of dancing around. So with these tables, so the Gorilla goes on and puts Freddy in this full Nelson, and we then have the waiters starting to punch into Freddy, and we of course have them go on and be like, well, hey, we want our meals back. So they're punching Freddy so hard that he's puking up these meals, and I was like, that's kind of gross. But like they go on and they punch him so hard, and they're like, well, yeah, like we're getting all our meals back. So all of a sudden, So High is to start getting into this fight because he, of course, was to go on and kind of be in here and kind of just be drunk, and he wakes up and he's like, hey, what's going on? And it's like, well, hey, like, mind your business, old man. Like, we have something going on here. And so we just start to have So High who just kind of gets into the fight and just starts knocking people out. So we have So High that goes on and is to start like fighting. So we go on and have the waiters who are like, well, hey man, like don't get into this fight, like we're just gonna have this guy like go in and clean all our toilets. And so Freddy goes on and is to start to fight the restaurant owner, and we have So High that starts fighting the gorilla, and he bizarrely has this like towel fighting thing that he kind of goes into with gorilla, and that was just so weird. But he's like flapping with these towels and just smacking the gorilla to just get him to kind of back away. So we have So High that is to look at Freddy, who's just kind of beating up this restaurant owner. He's like, dude, don't do that anymore. Let's get out of here. So both So High and Freddy leave, and so Freddy asks So High, it's like, well, hey man, like, how old are you? you don't really seem like a guy that has this kind of like ability in you, but man, you were kind of really taking out those guys. So we have So High that's like, well, hey, why couldn't you pay for your meal? Like, come on, man. So we have them all of a sudden, like, we have So High that drops that his name is Mr. So, and so we have Freddy who kind of gets ticked because, like, well, hey, that's like the same name of his uncle that got him in this mess in the first place. Because if Freddy wouldn't have heard about So High, then he wouldn't have gone on and just run away from his family. So we go on to have So High figure it out that this, of course, is to be Freddy, the guy that he is to have been paid to train. So we go on to have Mr. So that is to state, it's like, well, yeah, like, I am that guy. Like, I am the guy that you're going to state that you're going to go on and teach him a lesson, and you're going to beat that guy up, and all these kind of things. And so we have Freddy this to realize, like, oh my god, you're So High. And so Freddy just starts running. He tries to run away from this guy, but there's nothing he can do. So High is to find Freddy. When Freddy is exhausted and he's run away and he's kind of holding onto this tree, we have So High that is to take this tie that is on his drinking container and grab Freddy's hand and takes him. And all of a sudden we start to see that So High is trying to get Freddy into all of these, like, almost kind of submission-like moves to kind of stretch him out. And so we have Freddy that is to start to get like, oh my god, please don't, come on. So we all of a sudden have Freddy who's like, okay, like, well, let's get into this fight. And he ends up doing this tiger stance, and this tiger stance all of a sudden rips the back of his pants. And then we have all of a sudden Freddy who's just like, whoops, like, I just ripped my pants. It's like, well, yeah, I guess that tiger stance isn't going to be all that strong now, is it? So we have a point where Freddy gets into this one kind of stance, and we have So High that goes on and just eats Freddy's hand, and he's like, oh my god, you just bit my hand. So we have Freddy that tries to use like monkey kung fu. So we just get to where Freddy is just getting flung around. So uh and just taken down. So Freddy is just like, okay, can't you just not go on and take this job on? And So High is like, no, your dad just paid me, so I'm gonna do it. So you're like, regardless of whether you want it to happen or not, I'm going to train you. So we have Freddy and So High go to his place. So the very first thing that Freddy's gonna learn is how to fall, and fall a lot. So we have So High that is just really just pushing and shoving and flipping uh, Freddy all over the place. And we go on to have Freddy like, well, hey, like, come on, like, why are you making me do all this? Why are you just pushing me onto the ground? And we have So High that's just like, well, the first thing that you need to learn is how to fall. So we have them both after this long day. We have Freddy and So High sleeping, and they're kind of in the same thing together. And so when Freddy tries to escape, realizing that So High is sleeping, we all of a sudden realize that, bizarrely, Freddy has a string over his toe. And when Freddy is to get to a certain place, we then have Freddy who cannot move a step further, and he's just kind of stuck with his string on his toe. So Freddy's to realize that So High is to be awake, and so when Freddy tries to escape out this door, there all of a sudden is this pulley system that is to keep Freddy there, as when Freddy tries to open this door, we have So High that pulls this string, and the door is closed back again, to have Freddy now having his neck and his head stuck in one part of the door, and the rest of his body being stuck in another. So we then go on to have Freddy having this bucket while he's balancing on these massive jars that are the size of two people put together. And so we have Freddy who's balancing on these jars, and he has this bucket where he has to pour water into all these jars until we have So High that is to state, okay, this is enough. So he keeps telling him what jar to pour it into, and so the more and more we do this, we all of a sudden are to see that Freddy is to then fall into one of these jars because he gets just exhausted. And So High is like, oh my god, like, he's gonna die, he's gonna drown in one of these jars. So High is to go after Freddy, to then realize that Freddy is playing So High. So we start to we have Freddy that is to grab So High, dunk him into this jar, and is to have Freddy get out of the jar, scramble to put this lid on. When So High is to try to get the lid off, we have Freddy that goes on and grabs this rock, chucks the rock, puts it on the lid, and then it's to tell So High, it's like, I hope you drowned. And so we have Freddy that tries to leave. So we go on to have Freddy, who is off, trying to warm his wet clothes. And so we have Freddy that goes on and does that right on top of Thunderleg's secret mailbox. So we have Freddy that's just kind of like having a fire going on and trying to warmthen up his wet clothes. So we have all of a sudden that Freddy is talking to Thunderleg, and we have Thunderleg that is telling Freddy to move and he won't. So this ends up just simply having to get into a fight between the two of them. And so there is so many funny exchanges here. So we all of a sudden have Freddy that is to start to fight Thunderleg, and Thunderleg is to tell Freddy, it's like, dude, like, your kung fu is like crap. And we have Freddy that's like, well, hey, I learned this all from my father. And so Thunderleg, it's like, well, I'm your father. Like, I'm your daddy. Like, I'm your freaking daddy. Like, yeah, I'm gonna make you, like, I'm gonna make you my puppet. Like, I'm gonna make you my daddy. And just, it just, so Thunderleg goes on and is to just beat the crap out of Freddy. And is to go on and tell him, it's like, well, hey, like, you need to go on and you need to clean, like, toilets. You need to clean latrines and you need to clean the crap and urine that's you need to go on and do that. So, like, you don't need to fight anybody. You just need to go and clean toilets the rest of your life. So we have, like a dog forcibly, Freddy is to have to go through Thunderleg's legs and kind of walk on all fours to get away from Thunderleg, and so to be like a less than person. So Thunderleg is like, yeah, like I show that guy what's what. So we have Freddy that is to get away from Thunderleg, and he is immediately having flashbacks of the fight that he just had seconds ago. Every bit of it where he's getting beaten up, and the guy was talking about, like, well, yeah, you should go on and clean toilets, because, like, that's what you should do. And I was just like, dude, we just saw this fight. We just saw him getting beaten the crap out of. You could just have had, like, really, you could have had just Freddy, who is just kind of like thinking and just feeling horrible about him just getting clocked by that guy, instead of having to go through all of the memories of it. It was like, what the heck was that? So, because we just had this fight. So, as if we completely forgot about it seconds ago. So, we also had the clothes thing, where Freddy was to get away from Thunderlegs, but then Thunderlegs is say, like, well, hey, like, what about your pants you were trying to dry off? And when Freddy reaches for the pants, the Thunderlegs puts the pants in the fire, and he's like, yeah, I own you. And it's like, wow, like, Freddy is to just be like, wow, like, this guy not only beat the crap out of me, but then is to also just rub it in my face. Like, okay. So, we go on to have Freddy that goes back into Sohai's place. And so Freddy now is to really want to learn from Sohai, to just be like, well, hey, like I really need to learn from this guy. I don't know when he's finally gonna get this training in, but like I gotta really try to butter this guy up now. So we go on to have where, like, Freddy takes this guy's coat where he's trying to warm up his coat via this fire. Freddy's like, hey, I'll go on and I'll do it. And so we have Freddy that's talking to Sohai, and he gets distracted and he accidentally, like, burns the guy's coat. And so the guy's like, no, this is a really good coat. And he's like, I'm sorry. So we then go on and next have Sohai, who is to have these kind of like bamboo sticks with these strings inside of them. And we have, again, Freddy that is getting tortured with these sticks to kind of have him being, like, flipped around and have him being, like, hooked by these wrists, and so we consistently have Freddy that is trying to figure out a way to kind of like pull away from these sticks, and then kind of like get them to where like he can try and like figure out a way to not have to like feel so bad about him kind of getting pushed around by So High. So we have Freddy that complains about the food and the water that So High is to be serving him, and so we have, of course, So High that's like, shut up, like, want to probably just slap him in the face and be like, shut up. So we then next have this kind of wood constructed thing where Freddy is to be hung upside down, and he is to have his ankles at the top of this wood piece, and he is to be kind of hanging upside down, and he has this bucket that is directly behind him, and so Freddy is hanging upside down and needing to take these cups of water and put it into the back of him, where he's to pour this water into these buckets behind him, and he is consistently just continuing to do that and having to like lift his body and almost doing these like crunches, but he's also having to like move his whole entire hand to get these water things from behind him. And so we have Freddy that is consistently keep doing this, but then all of a sudden, once he sees So High starting to fall asleep, we have Freddy that is to kind of get his ankles from out of this kind of wood contraption, this wood device, and he starts taking this kind of bigger little scoop thing, and as it takes some of the water and dump it into the bucket. And so Freddy is to go on and kind of wake up So High, who is already kind of watching Freddy anyways to see if he would cheat. And so Freddy goes on to tell So High, it's like, hey, I'm done, like I finished it. And like So High is like, man, that was pretty fast. So all of a sudden let me pause here for a second. So we see that Freddy had gone on to put all these things of water in this bucket, goes to So High, and So High just gives him smaller cups and is to say like, okay, go on and do this again. So the next thing that Freddy is to go on and have to learn is how to crack walnuts with his own hand. And so we have So High that is like, hey, crack this nut. And so Freddy is to take his shoe and want to smack it with the shoe. I'm like, how is this shoe going to smack this nut? That doesn't make any sense. But so we have, like, So High is like, no, like, do it like this. And he takes his hand and he crushes it. And so Freddy is to just be like, I can't crush this with my hands. So, but eventually he takes practice and Freddy is crushing the walnuts. So we have So High that just continues to give him walnuts to crack. So after that, we have Freddy and So High who go on a time in the town. And so they see this betting table where it's kind of like this whole, like, there's a bunch of cups and you kind of move them around and there's an item underneath it. So we have So High that starts betting because he's like, well, yeah, I definitely want to go on and get into this table because I know where the thing is. So High is doing rather well to the point of one person going on and telling So High, it's like, dude, I think you need to get out of here. The guy's like, no, I haven't even gotten to my wine money yet. And so we have So High who knows where the thing is to where everybody's like, okay, follow this guy. So we all of a sudden find out that again Sohai wins, and so we have a guy come in called Ironhead Rat. That's what it states in IMDb, and so we then go on and say like, okay, guy, like since Sohai you're doing so well, the Ironhead goes on to do this whole thing again, but where Sohai, of course, is to pick, we have the Ironhead that lifts the cup and nothing is there. But then we, of course, have Sohai that's like, no, 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 no. Like, you may be fast, but you're not that fast. So we have Sohai who is to reveal that Ironhead was trying to trick him by having this thing in his hand. So we all of a sudden have one of the guys who's working at the game who just yells out, police, police, and everyone scatters. So we then have all of a sudden that the Ironhead guy is to fight against Freddy instead of fighting against Sohai. So we have Ironhead that goes on and is to use these like headbutt maneuvers, which of course, like if you've gone on and you've heard about like football, no matter how sturdy your head might be, you can go on and you could easily like go on to do some real damage by doing that kind of maneuver, and possibly you can go on and and paralyze yourself. So that's why like people would have to go on and be really safe about how you go on and tackle people in football. And plus also you could easily get concussions a lot. So with that said, we have this guy who's using his head as this like kind of battering ram, as if he's like the Spider-Man villain, like Hammerhead, that he has like an anvil for a head. So we all of a sudden have the Iron Head who is to state that he's like the Iron Bullet. So we have then Freddy and Sohai that fight together to try and fight Ironhead. But what ends up kind of getting to where like it's turning around for Freddy is Freddy goes on and like tosses his pants over Ironhead's upper body, and then is to go on and find this hammer with this kind of string attached to it. And so we then have Freddy who's kind of using this hammer with this string on it almost like nunchucks. And so we start to have Freddy that hammers on to Iron Man's head and starts having these kind of big weird lumps that start to pop up through this guy's head, to where Ironhead is to just go on and just kind of give up because he's like, no, 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 like, I don't want this anymore. Like, I'm losing, obviously. So we then transition to have again Freddy is still doing some training. So we have Freddy that is in this kind of push-up like position, but his feet or his ankles are to be on this wood bench, and we consistently have Freddy who's like shifting his hands back and forth like this, and that seems to be the exercise. And so we go on to have Freddy again, who's like, man, my hands, like, they're messed up. And so we finally have Sohai that's like, you know what, how about you go and get wine from the village? Just, I'm out of wine, so you go and you get it. So we have Freddy that's taking all the time in the world to get away from Sohai. And so he's scarfing down all this food in this restaurant, and he's getting this wine. And so he's to go on and fill the container that is to be his uncle's, but it seems to mostly be of water instead of fully wine. So we have Ironhead that comes back with the King of Bamboo. And he comes back to Sohai's place. And so the King of Bamboo has this big long staff and is to come in there like, well, yeah, I'm going to teach you a lesson. And so not knowing who this guy really was. So the King of Bamboo is talking with Sohai, and it's like, well, hey, like, you do know that I'm Sohai, right? And then the King of Bamboo is like, oh my god, you had me come here to face off against Sohai? What a mistake. But then all of a sudden, we have the Iron Head who is to realize that Sohai's hands are starting to shake because he doesn't have his wine. So, like, there's already some pain that is start to sink in. So Ironhead is looking at the shaking of Sohai's hands, and so Ironhead is telling the King of Bamboo, it's like, well, hey, like, this guy is to not be Sohai because his hands are shaking. Like, come on, like, do you think the guy like that would not be having his hand shake? And so King of Bamboo starts fighting against Sohai, and so Freddy is making his way back to the house, and so we go on to have like Freddy and Sohai who are trying to fight off the King of Bamboo, and the King of Bamboo is like, well, hey, this fight isn't with you. So we go on and have both Sohai and Freddy trying to avoid the King of Bamboo because they're not ready for him. So we have Freddy that runs in the house, and he is to go on and tell like Sohai to like get into the house. So Sohai jumps into this window, and then the window closes. We have both the Ironhead and we have both the King of Bamboo that are trying to get into Sohai's house, but we have Freddy that pulls the lever, and Sohai gets his neck stuck in the door, or between the two doors, and we go on to have both Freddy and both Sohai that jump out this window, and so we have Ironhead and we have we have the King of Bamboo that are like, hey, both of them are gone now. So we go on to have both Freddy and we have both Sohai that are to sometime later come back to their house. So we go on and have Freddy, who is giving crap to Sohai about how he goes on, he needs to get drunk all the time, and so Freddy is also just like, well, what am I really doing here? Like, you're just beating the crap out of me. It's like what am I really learning here? Like, why am I really so this is almost like Karate Kid, almost like, where we don't really realize like why this guy's there. He's like, he's sanding the floor, he's waxing on and off, and he's like, what am I doing? Like, you're just torturing me. So we have Sohai that's like, no, 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 like, you don't realize it because your father had sent you to come here, and or let me rephrase that. Robert was to go on and send Freddy to come to Sohai's place to get trained, and because Robert knew that Sohai had a secret style that no one else really uses. And so Freddy's like, oh, so what's that? And we have Sohai that states is like, well, I have the drunken style. And Freddy's like, what? So we have Sohai that states it's like, well, like in a drunken style, you're pretending to lose, and that goes on to let you win because the other person is kind of thrown off guard by your style, thinking that you are weak or that you're weakened, but actually you are very strong. So we all of a sudden have where Sohai is to be drunk, But then he goes on and takes this jar, and he almost like starts to do this almost like basketball like maneuver with this jar, and just kind of rolls it like around his arms, and kind of do this almost like juggling like maneuver. And so we have Freddy, who starts to drink and starts to get drunk. So we then go on to have both Freddy and both uh, Sohai going on to this drunken poem that, like, kind of both of them are one another finishing it. And so that's when we start to go on and have the days that follow that Sohai is to go on and thumb through every one of these pages, and is to then start to train Freddy on every technique of every drunken god. He's to thumb through everything, and like the first one is to be the god Lu with eternal strength, and just kind of goes on and on and on with all this. And I'm not going to go through every bit of that, because that's a really good chunk of this film. That is to have Freddy just kind of doing all these maneuvers. And so we then go on to this female drunk style, which is to be called Mrs. Ho. And we have Freddy that is like, wait a minute, like, I don't want to learn this style. Like, this is a female style. Like, this is too, like, girly to me. No. Like, I don't want to learn any of this. So we have Freddy that doesn't go on and practice that style because it's to be a female drunken style. So he's like, why do I need to learn this? So come to find out, that'll bite him in the butt. So we go on to find out that Mr. Lee makes his way to Robert. And so Mr. Lee is upset that Robert won't allow somebody to sell their land to him, and he wonders why that Robert is not allowing that. And so it's selling of a place called Bull Hill. So we have Mr. Lee that is a state. It's like, well, hey, like, I want to get this graveyard. I want this graveyard to be sold to me because this graveyard is full of ghosts, and I want to get rid of it. I want to figure out a way to fix this place. And we go on and we have Robert that's like, no, like, you're lying to me. Like, you want the graveyard because there is a way for you to get coal out of it. And that's a really high-end thing to try to get here, and so I'm not going to let you have it. So we have Mr. Lee. It's like, well, like, you can just have this guy sell it to me, and I'll give you a pretty good cut out of this. And Robert is like, no, I'm not going to let this be sold to you. Capiche? You get me? So we then go on to next see that Thunderleg is to go to his secret mailbox to then find out that for $1,000, Robert Wong is to get killed. So we go on to have Freddy that is to go out in the town. And so we have Freddy that meets up with the King of Bamboo. And we come to find out that the King of Bamboo is having this event, and he's cooking. And so Freddy seems to go on and is to be mocking the King of Bamboo's cooking, kind of like testing some of the stuff, and he's like, pfft, or he's like eating some of the stuff, and he's like, nah. So we have the king who is to feel disrespected, and so we then have Freddy who's going to fight with the King of Bamboo. So we have throughout this fight, there's this one really cool moment where we have Freddy that shoves this bowl into the King of Bamboo's mouth, and he breaks off the bowl with his teeth. And then Freddy's like, "Oh my god! Like you just broke this bowl with your teeth." And the guy's like, "Yeah, I guess my teeth is pretty strong." So we even also have a moment that while they're fighting, we all of a sudden have Freddy who farts. And he's like, "Yeah, that's called a fart." And so it's like, what the heck? I'm like, oh my god, this is funny. So we have, of course, where the King of Bamboo almost falls into this like cow pie, which is basically just this huge thing of crap. And so the King of Bamboo is like, "Well, I almost fell into it." And Freddy's like, "No, you're gonna fall right into it." And so he takes this wood bench, shoves it into the King of Bamboo. The King of Bamboo falls right into the cow pie, gets plopped right in his face. And so when he kind of like picks himself up, he just has this like, just smushed crap all over his face. So we have Freddy that realizes that he's kind of just defeated the King of Bamboo. He's disgraced him. So we have Freddy that goes on to pick up this wine and is to kind of have like 2 jars of wine in his hands, and he's making his way back to So High. So we have So High calling for his master. It's like, "Well, hey, where are you? Where are you, buddy?" And so all of a sudden he sees this note, and he writes. So High is to mention, it's like, "Well, hey, there's nothing more that I can teach you, Freddy. Like, you have to go on, and you just have to go back to your dad and kind of take whatever I've learned, and figure out a way to have it be better and better and master it." So we all of a sudden have some random guy that is running to Robert and telling him that it seems that Mr. Lee is trying to take over Bull Hill. And so Robert is like, "Okay, well, we have to go there and we have to stop him." So this guy and Robert are running to this location, and come to find out, this guy is to kind of want to just kind of like tie his shoes or something like that, and then he disappears. And so we then find out that Thunderleg is wanting to go on and fight Robert. And so Thunderleg, it's like, "Well, hey, like, I heard that your like skills are very high and very good and this and that." So I'm like, wait a minute, you just gave so much crap to Freddy about his fighting skill from his dad, and his dad is Robert. So we have Thunderleg that is to kick Robert in the face, and then we see this like big welt on Robert's face. And so we have Freddy that realizes where his father Robert is, and so come to find out, he tries to stop this whole fight. And so Freddy is like, "Well, hey, I'm gonna go on and like I'm gonna fight you, Thunderleg," because he realizes that he's the only one that possibly can. So Freddy fights Thunderleg, and we realize that like Freddy doesn't have any like alcohol around him. So we have So High who comes back just to give him this cantina, this container. And so Freddy starts to get really drunk. So we go on to have Freddy that is to face off against Thunderleg, and we have him go on and have to use every single one of the styles that they showed before with that book. So Freddy has to go on and use every single one of these styles, and Thunderleg is just like, "Come on, really? Is that all the gods that you have?" And so we then have Freddy that realizes that he has to use the Mrs. Ho style, the female style. And Freddy's like, "Oh my god, I did not learn that female style." And so Freddy's like, "Well, can't you just teach it to me really quickly?" so high, and he's like, no, like you have to go on through all the styles and kind of combine them together and kind of figure out what so high or what Mrs. Ho would eventually be. And so we have Freddy that goes on to like do all the styles, and then he's like, oh yeah, I figured out what it is. It's like this kind of like makeup style. And so we have Freddy whose voice is a change into this kind of feminine like voice, and Freddy is to go on and is to start taking out Thunderleg and doing a pretty good job of this. So we end up having Freddy continuing to drink from this container, and he finally asks Sohai, it's like, what's in this? And the guy says it's 100% pure. It's white lightning. And so Freddy's like, oh my god, I am so drunk. So Freddy then tries to use this style, and so at some point we finally go on and have Freddy, who is to figure out a way to use these styles and figure out the perfect way to take down Thunderleg. And we see where Freddy is to physically take Thunderleg down, and is to go on and kind of like elbow him into the back, and that is like the final blow. So Freddy beats Thunderleg, and then is to go on and meet up with the rest of his friends, and that's just how the movie ends. And we have like no credit thing. Like, I would have assumed that Freddy would have gone on and would have reasonably been married off at the end of this, or like something would have happened to we would actually have like an ending, not just like, okay, we have Freddy that fights the guy and he beats him and that's it. Like, I thought there would have been more to that, but I guess not. So with that said, I'm going to go on and get out of here. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about this film. But other than that, I'm going to get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.